Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast, Identity and Influence. My name is Mo, and I'll be sitting in the host chair today. And I'm here again with Dr. Lem Ucita. Dr. Lem, what up?
Yes, sir. Let's go. Good to be on the show again, man. Thanks for bringing us together and, creating the space for us to talk about these things.
Yeah, today we're talking about leadership lesson number 11 that you've written, Lem, and it's called Name Your Price. I love
Yeah.
that title. So can you share a story of when you first heard the phrase, name your price, and why it resonated with you as a leadership lesson?
Yeah. Thank you again for just allowing us to have these conversations around leadership. When it comes to this phrase, name your price, I really don't remember when I heard it or where I heard it, but I definitely connected it to leadership. And it doesn't take long to see the importance of having boundaries in leadership. And ultimately, it's about the price that you're willing to pay, whether it's money or resources, your relationship, your marriage, your career. What are you willing to do in order to succeed? What are you willing to do in order to lead? Like, you need to know that there is a price to leadership. And if you can name the price before you get into, a compromising or weird situation, then you can have clarity when you get to that point and make the best decision.
Yeah, I really love that. So, what inspired
Right.
you to write this article, and what do you hope for leaders to take away from it?
Yeah, I think I didn't know that there was a price for leadership. And so this lesson came from a lot of mistakes, and this lesson came from looking back at decisions that I made and looking back at leadership roles where I wasn't clear. I wasn't clear on my values, and I wasn't clear on then the price that I had to pay in order to lead in that situation. And so, yeah, being clear on the price that you're willing to pay for leadership just gives you clarity, and it helps you to be more efficient as a leader.
You talk about the importance of knowing your boundaries before high pressure situations rise, which is
Yeah.
a great way to do it. So, how can leaders practically prepare for these kind of moments?
So I think it changes as you grow. And like I just shared, when I was a younger leader, I just didn't think through any of this stuff. And so good on you to the listener, to the audience who is here listening to this episode. Thank you for listening. I mean, it just shows that you want to develop your leadership and you kind of want to gain leadership insights in order to help you to be a better leader. But no one shared any of this stuff with me. It's stuff that I had to stumble through in order to learn this stuff. I think as you become more secure in who you are and as you get clarity again on your values, it helps you to understand that there's a price to leadership, and it helps you to gain clarity on what you're willing to pay in order to be a leader, right? The example that comes to me is, and the thing that I had to learn was the people pleasing side of leadership. And that's something that I think every leader needs to work through. If you're a people pleaser, that's a huge price to pay in leadership. And what are you willing to do? Like, and then when you make decisions as a leader, how much of that people pleasing can really get in the way of a good leadership decision? And so I think the less you care about people pleasing, I think better decisions you make as a leader. But that's just my opinion, and we can have that conversation.
Yeah, you mentioned a quote, you can't start a new experience with 5 years experience. I
Yeah.
love that. So, can
Yeah.
you elaborate on how this applies to leadership growth?
Right. There's just a maturing and lived experience that only comes with time. Like I was sharing with you, I've made lots of bad decisions as a leader, and only through experiencing those bad decisions did I come to understand the price of leadership. You can have an aspirational desired goal, like I one day I want to be a strong leader, but until you go through the process of of gaining clarity on the price that it takes to lead at that level, yeah, man, you're just not going to be ready for it. So you can't start a job with 5 years experience. You start your job right where you're at, and you gain experience along the way.
So, you've had a lot of experience with new situations, new
Yeah.
opportunities. Can you share with the audience facing a situation where you weren't sure of your boundaries and how you had to figure them out in that very moment? And what did you do to learn throughout that process?
Yeah, I learned a lot of these lessons as a younger leader, and I'm still learning these lessons because, as an even older leader, like you just get different opportunities. But I learned many of these leadership lessons when I was a young executive in a Christian higher ed setting. I was vice president for student life at a Christian college, and I made many mistakes, lots of people pleasing mistakes. I let the opinion of others or the perceived opinion of others sway my decisions. And then when it came time to stand firm on the decision, I wasn't able to stand firm on that decision because it was based off of, you know, people's opinions and not necessarily my values. And so, to gain clarity on your values really kind of helps you to not listen to not be swayed by people pleasing. Ultimately as a leader, they were my decisions, but when you can't stand firm on the decision you made because you were people pleasing, like that just puts you in a tough situation. But that's the one that stands out for me.
We know that leadership isn't about titles. So, how do you see the concept of naming your price applying to informal leadership, such as relationships and everyday interactions?
You will do whatever for those that you love, but why would you do a lot for a relationship that means very little? And having clarity on these relationships and what they mean to you really kind of helps you make better leadership decisions. I mean, why are you even in a relationship with a person if it doesn't mean much to you? Well, I think one of my values as a leader is that I have functional relationships, and people don't like that. Like it sounds like I'm using people, and I'm not using people. Just some relationships are functional. Like there's some people in the organization that I just don't interact with because, I just don't interact with them. And it doesn't help me as a leader or help me in the organization. In fact, I might get in their way if I interact too much with them. They serve a function and nothing more, right? And they're not a part of my inner circle. They're not even a part of that, like that next circle. So why would I give any relationship time or effort to someone that aren't in those circles? They're functional relationships. And again, we can talk more about that. Maybe I could write about what functional relationship truly looks like, but that's the thing that comes to mind.
In the article, you discuss the balance of control in relationships. So,
Yeah.
what advice would you give what advice would you give leaders about knowing when to relinquish control versus when you want to assert it?
Yeah. I think that's easy when you're clear on the importance of the relationship. And if you got clarity on the relationship, you can both relinquish control and assert it. Yeah, it's possible to do both.
So, can you share an example of a time where you navigated leadership dynamics and, like, a personal relationship, maybe where you had to name your price?
Yeah. The easiest example for me is with my ex-wife, right? What price was I willing to pay in order to be in a relationship with her? And ultimately, that relationship ended, but it wasn't immediate. Like it took me a while to figure that out. It took time, and I wasn't necessarily. Well, I wanted that relationship, and it had high priority for me, and so I was willing to pay a high price for it. But ultimately, I guess she didn't necessarily want to pay a high price for it, and she didn't want to be in a relationship with me any longer. And so, like, I could have kept wanting it, and kept working on it, but you can't, you know, you can't work on a relationship that somebody doesn't necessarily want to be in, and so ultimately that relationship ended. And, that price that, like I didn't know I was willing to pay that price, but it took time to get to that, to that point. Yeah. And like I would have done when I was in a relationship with her, I would have relinquished control. I would have, asserted it like in that situation. But when someone doesn't want to be in a relationship with you, like, what can you do?
Yeah. Let's talk about the thin red line and sovereignty. Very powerful. So, how would you explain its relevance to leadership in your own words?
I think Hugh McLeod's thin red line and this concept of, naming your prices is it's exactly the same concept. What is the line that you will not cross in relationship? What is the line that you will not cross in leadership? Like, again, and I think having that clarity in values and vision really kind of helps you, have those lines. And so yeah, I think it's exactly the same concept.
So leaders have a lot of struggles. One of those struggles is setting boundaries.
Right.
I talk with clients all the time about what it means to set boundaries. So, what are the first steps that a leader can take to identify and enforce their own thin red line?
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough question, and I would say it's different for every person. And so, like in a coaching situation, when you have more information, it's a little easier um, to answer that question. But I think the first step is to have a clear list of values. What are your values that you'll never compromise on? And then to get clear on those. So again, back to a principle that we keep bringing up in these episodes, write them down. What are the values for you and your relationships and your leadership? I just mentioned one earlier. Like, I don't mind functional relationships. You know, I don't need to have close friends. I don't want to be close friends with everyone. Some of those relationships are just going to be functional, and I'm okay with that. But then there are those that I'm in, relationships that I value even more, and I'll spend more time and, pay a higher price for those relationships. I'm clear on that. Another one of my values is never make other people's problems your problems. Like, I can't tell you as a young leader how many times, or as a leader, someone comes and they bring their personal problem, um, and it's their deal, it's their burden to carry, and like, you know, they might be asking for a raise, or might be asking for time off. And there are, again, policies and procedures for time off. But if I can't give you a raise, it's not my problem that you can't afford your lifestyle. Like, that's your problem. You know what I mean? And my problem is I don't have money to give you a raise. I can't make other people's problem my problem. I mean, having clarity on that value really helps me in my leadership practice, and many of these leadership lessons that we've been talking about in the last couple of, episodes are my values. Like, these are my boundaries. And so, like, writing them down and getting clarity on it really helps me in my leadership.
Yeah, boundaries are essential, especially in leadership, but actually in any relationship. So, what are the risks of failing to define your boundaries as a leader, and how can this lead to compromising your integrity?
Yeah. You either run your boundaries and you know your boundaries, or it runs you, right? And it pushes you beyond your boundaries. And then if you're not clear on the price that you're willing to pay, you'll pay more than you're able to pay sometimes, right? And you'll pay in relationships, you'll pay in your health, you'll pay a higher price in just all kinds of ways in your life. Like, leadership is like intricately and intimately connected to your health, to your character, to your well-being. And if you're not clear on your boundaries, it can overtake with your life.
Yeah, I really wish that people had better understanding of boundaries and why it's so important. And every time I take people through goal setting,
Yeah.
we always start by asking, what are your boundaries? What are you willing to do? What are you willing to fight for in any relationship or whatever you're doing? So I'd love to talk about practical application for this. So, what strategies or tools have you found most effective for helping leaders to define values, non-negotiables, boundaries?
Yes. Again, writing them down. Like, we're just going to keep coming back to that principle. When you can write them down, then you can refine them, and then you can develop them. And just having clarity on your values really kind of helps you also. I think it helps you drive goals, right? You write better goals when you're clear on your values. And then strategizing around your values. If there's an opportunity that comes up that doesn't fit your value, just don't do it, right? Getting clear on your values really helps you to get clear on your boundaries. And when you're clear on your boundaries, you're clear on the price that you're willing to pay for leadership.
How can leaders revisit and adjust their boundaries as they grow in roles or face new challenges? Because as you gain more control, more power, more authority,
Right.
it causes a shift in the way that we need to set boundaries, and the growth process within that leadership journey becomes more intense and it affects more people. So you can't screw it up. So what do we do about that?
I think you got to keep in mind that that as you go through seasons in life, things will change. When you get married, you can't do as much as when you were single. And when you have a child, the child takes over the schedule and the budget and all your free time. Like there's no such thing as free time any longer. And in seasons of life, things will change. Like the older you get, the more leadership responsibilities you have, and the bigger your operating budget, the more people you're in charge of, their well-being, their livelihood. And so, as you develop in leadership, all of those things will change. And, you know, if you're clear on your values, those values should never change. You can gain clarity on your values, right? And gain nuance on your values, and those can drive leadership, but they should never change. They can adjust and you can gain clarity on them. But yeah, values should continue to drive. Um, yeah, should just drive your boundaries.
I'm sure there's people that are listening that are saying, yeah, that's easier said than done, Dr. Lim. I have compromised my values before, or I've compromised my boundaries. So what advice would you give them to regain control? Because the leadership journey doesn't stop. It just continues. And once you're playing catch up, you are now behind. What can they do to get back on track?
Again, first of all, do you have them written down? You can come back to your values and reevaluate. Your values can get clearer every time you process through them and evaluate them. But you're not able to do that if you don't have them written down. To regain control of your leadership journey, I mean, if you've lost control of your leadership journey, then like I think it's really tied into, like, did you have your values written down? Did you understand them well? And if you didn't, then maybe we need a mentor or coach to kind of help us process through those to gain clarity on it.
So on a macro level, how has the principle of naming your price impacted your own leadership style?
Having clarity on the price that I'm willing to pay and clarity on my values helps me to explain myself in the interview process. When I'm interviewing for a position, like, I'm clear on it. Like, this is what I'm willing to do. This is what I'm not willing to do. And it also helps me in my communication and in my leadership positions that I'm in, right? Like, one of my values is to lead relationally, right? And it's sometimes that takes a lot of work, right? But then when I'm clear that, like, not all relationships, some relationships are functional, it puts things in proper perspective. Does that make sense? And also, when you understand the cost of doing business, when you understand the cost of leading, like, you just steer clear from things that, like, either steal your energy or is just, point blank a waste of time. And so, yeah, man, getting some clarity on your values, getting some clarity on, the price that you're willing to pay really just, I think, focuses you as a leader.
So let's keep it practical. And why don't you tell the audience maybe a situation where you had to make a tough decision because you wouldn't compromise your values? How'd that turn out?
So I received a directive once from the executive VP when I was the vice president for student life at a college. And the directive was to fire a particular employee because they cost too much, right? Their salary was way high. And I decided, I think the directive was to find some money in the budget, right? And their suggestion was to fire this one person. I had to fire 3 other people in order to keep that person, right? Because the cost of firing this one person was higher than just whatever was the budget and his salary. Like, he was loved by the students. And so firing him was a much higher cost than just, his salary for that year. And so I was willing to fire 3 other people in order to keep him. And looking back on it, it was a good move. He was well loved by the students and he served us better, by keeping him. Now, I lost a little bit of, did I lose anything from firing 3 people? Yeah, of course, because, people love those, students, and other people love those 3 people, but I would have lost way more. The opportunity cost would have been way higher to fire that one person. So sometimes, you just gotta stick with your values. You know what I mean? And in this situation, it was practical to just, I guess it wasn't practical to keep one person over 3 people, but it was definitely, it was definitely a lower price to pay by doing so.
Well, like we have said in previous episodes, leadership's not easy. It's hard. It's making tough
No, it's not.
decisions.
Yeah.
And so you as the leader have to live with that decision, and hopefully you made the right decision
Yeah.
within that. And
Yeah. And it
sometimes we made
was.
the right one, and sometimes we made the wrong one. So I'm glad that turned
Yeah.
out to be a good
Yeah.
decision. Whereas
Yeah.
in the moment, I'm sure there was a
It was
lot
a
of
tough
people
decision in the moment for sure.
asking questions, as
Yeah.
they should. We should always
Yeah.
be pressing our leaders. So that's good. So what's an important lesson that you've learned about protecting your sovereignty as a leader?
That's a great question. I think the most important lesson is when I get clarity on my values and when I get clarity on the price that I'm willing to pay, then everything that fits under that is protected, right? I protect myself, I protect my family, and they're the most important thing to me at this point in my life. And I've made decisions that have hurt me and my family before in the past, but I learned from them and never again. So gaining that clarity helps me to choose the most important things, and like the security of clarity of values and vision helps you to just be a stronger leader.
So in terms of the name your price concept, what's one thing that our listeners should take away today that they can apply to their own leadership journey?
Clarity on values and vision save you a lot of heartache for sure. It'll save you a lot of time from bad decisions. And I wish somebody would have pointed that out to me earlier on in my leadership journey. I would have done that work because I had to learn the hard way in making bad decisions and, gaining clarity. Yeah, after a bad decision or after paying a price that was higher than I was willing to pay. But I didn't know that at the time. And so, yeah, do the work of writing down your values, aligning it with your vision so that like when you get into situations, you're clear on it. You know what the decision is.
So lastly, is there anything about this leadership lesson that we haven't covered, but you think is crucial for people to hear?
No, I mentioned this a little earlier, but your personal life is connected intimately and intricately with your leadership development and ability. There's a cost to leadership, and just know that you'll pay a price for leadership. And again, sometimes it's your personal health, sometimes it's your relationship, sometimes it's resources and money, sometimes it's time away from family or time away from things that you love to do. But you're going to pay a price, and leadership in your personal life, they're kind of connected. And so just understand that as you move into leadership roles, as you develop as a leader, there's going to be a cost, and get clear on your boundaries, get clear on your values, and it'll help you make better decisions.
Wise words, brother. When you apply these principles that Dr. Lim is talking about, it's going to change the way that people look at you, and they're going to want to follow you because they're going to know that you're always looking out for their
Right.
best interest.
Right.
Dr. Lim, thanks so much for going over this leadership lesson today, leadership lesson 11.
Yeah.
Name your price. I think this is still my favorite one out of all of them, just by the name
That's
itself.
awesome.
And I look forward to the next one.
Right on.
For my listeners, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and sign up for our newsletter. It doesn't cost you anything, and it's going to give you some great insights. We'll see you next time. Dr. Lim, thanks, brother.
Thank you.